Okay, so here we go. We're going to do a quick review just on the Pythagorean theorem and the distance formula. And then I'm going to mention something a little bit different than we've done the last couple days. So when you're doing a review on Pythagorean theorem and distance, what I really want you to be able to pay attention to today is the two formulas and going slow to make sure you can work through the two problems, right? So when you're working on the Pythagorean theorem, remember the most important thing is find your right angle. Once you find your right angle, draw the arrow across from it. That becomes your side C. Side C is the most important part of this whole Pythagorean theorem. Because once you can identify where side C is, then the rest of the things seem to fit in pretty quickly for students. So find side C. Once you find side C, we can use our formula. And when you use the formula, just go slow, right? But put C where it belongs. And then remember your A's and your B's don't matter which side goes where. Once you have the Pythagorean theorem memorized, right, we're looking and reminding yourself how to use, right, then we go on to the distance formula. So we did a day on Pythagorean, we did a day on distance, and now we're going to talk through a review on both. The most important thing that we were reminded on the distance formula is to label your ordered pairs, because when kids label their ordered pairs, they generally can dump them into the formula so much faster. So remember, right, the first set of points is your x1 and y1, and your second set of points is your x2 and your y2, making sure you plug them into the right spots each time. Okay, so we're going to walk through just a couple of examples. If you want to write them down, that's great. If you feel like you can just follow along with me because you remember how to do them, that's also fine. Right, I'm going to walk through, right, first identify where that right angle is. Once I know where that right angle is, right, I can draw my line across from it, which means this side is my side C of 14. My side up here I'm going to call A, and my side down here I'm going to call B. Right, so since I know my A and my C this time and I don't know B, I'm going to use them and plug them into my formula. So this would be the 4 lines of work that you are required to show, right? Because you're required to show 6 lines of work for every question. So I'm going to plug them in to the formula, starting with my 6 for my A. So when I plug them in, it's going to look like this. 6 squared plus B squared, because I don't know B. And I do know my C is 14, so 14 squared. My mouse seems to be off a little bit, bear with me. So 6 squared, right, is 36. I don't know B, so I'm going to leave it as B squared. And then my C is 14 when I square is 196. To solve for my B, I need to get this 36 out of there, right? So I'm going to minus my 36 to both sides. All right, so I take away my 36 from both sides, right? When I take away my 36, it's going to look like this. 36 from that side, I take away my 36 from this side. I'd have B squared is equal to 160. And then remember that final step is always to square root. So then I'm going to square root my B squared, which is just going to give me my B. My 2 answers, right, is the square root of 160. And then I'm going to type it into my calculator. And then I'm going to round my answer to the nearest, hundredth. So I'm going to have B is equal to 12.65, because it was a 4 in it, it's going to round up. So my 2 answers, right, my square root of 160 and my 12.65. Second problem, right, this one would be my C across. My C across, I'm just going to do one of these where you don't know the C. Right, so this one, when I start working through this problem, is a little bit easier because I know my A and my B are interchangeable, right? I'm going to call my A the 7. I'm going to call my B the 10. And then my C is I don't know. So then when I walk through this one, it's going to look like this. 7 squared plus 10 squared. I'm going to make that look a little bit nicer. 7 squared plus my 10 squared equals my side C squared that I don't know. My 7 squared is 49. My 10 squared is 100 equals my C squared. Add them together to get 149 equals my C squared, right? And then when I square root it, if I square root 149, making sure you're typing the right buttons, right? And if I round square root of 149 to the nearest hundredth again, it would be 12.21. So making sure you can use the Pythagorean theorem. And then the second thing that's going to be on your assignment today is finding the distance between the 2 points, right? Using that distance formula. I think, again, the most important thing that you do today is that you label your ordered pairs first, x1, y1, and you label your second set the x2, y2. Once you label your 2 sets of points, right, it's so much easier to see where you're going to plug them into the formulas, right? So when I plug them in, I'm going to highlight them also so you see them. My x2 is -5 minus my x1 is -1, and my y's are going to be the -2 minus that 4 over here, right? So I'm going to start plugging them into the formula, showing my same 4 lines of work, right? So my 4 lines of work are going to look like this. A giant square root. Inside my x2, -5, minus my x1, which is -1 squared, plus my y2, which is -2, minus my y1, which is 4 squared. And then I'm going to do my inside my parentheses. So inside the parentheses, these two turn into a plus. And I would have -5 plus 1, which is -4 squared. Over here, -2 turns that into a plus a -4, which would be a -6 squared. And then I can square those values. When I square -4, remember, use your brain instead of the calculator, so you're not typing it in wrong. -4 times a -4 is a +16. A -6 times a -6 is a +36. And then my next step would be to add those two guys together, which 36 and 16 is going to give me 52. So the square root of 52, let's round this one to the nearest tenth this time, so 1 decimal place, which would be approximately 7.2. The last thing that we didn't talk about the last couple days, just as a quick thought, thinking through, is what's called a Pythagorean triple. So just listen to this part. There's not going to be any of these on your assignment, but there likely will be one of these when the MCA test happens. A Pythagorean triple is just a set of numbers. They call them counting numbers, so numbers that you could count to, that make the equation work. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. The most basic Pythagorean triple is the numbers 3, 4, and 5, because we can do 3 squared plus 4 squared, and it does in fact equal 5 squared, right? 9 plus my 16, because that's 4 squared, and then 5 squared is 25, and 9 plus 16 does equal 25. Right, so 25, yes, equals 25. So these 3 numbers are called the Pythagorean triple because they make the Pythagorean theorem work, right? 3 squared plus 4 squared does equal 5 squared. Remember, C is always that biggest number when you're working through a Pythagorean triple. So the expectation today, right, you show all 4 lines of work when you're doing Pythagorean theorem, all 4 lines of work when you're using the distance formula. And then if and when you finish today, I want you to make sure your assignment is corrected, right? So you know what you're doing correct and what you're not doing correct. If you finish it before the end of the hour, I want you to log into IXL again today. I know, right, it's been a little bit of time since we've logged into IXL. But I do want you to do that today if you finish early. So you're going to log into 8th grade. What I really want you to focus on is either this section 4 down here on the coordinate plane, finding the distance between 2 points, or the other thing to do would be to look at the Pythagorean theorem. Right, so either do one of those 2 things. These give you more real life questions, like they're going to show up on the MCA test with a little bit of word problems, but just more pictures and not just concrete examples that look like the problems that we've been doing. Okay, so make sure you show your work. You can use your calculator to square root your answers at the end. Otherwise, everything else should be ready for you to go.